Welcome to Time for Forgiveness, where we explore real stories.
Real stories that will transform your life through the power of forgiveness. And we have a very transformative story today. You're going to hear from Nate and Angela White.
Well, I know that God orchestrated this conversation because how I came aware of your story. But I know when I was hearing your story, it really just stopped me. It grabbed my attention because, we talk about this concept, this idea of forgiveness, and it sounds good. But then to actually practice it and live it in your life is very different. And when I heard this, we're talking the next day after this incident, that you two came together in agreement and offered forgiveness to this person who just drove off after killing your son. And, I think what we love about this show is we're offering voices, but stories that possibly ask others to consider what they could do in their own lives. Because I know people are listening thinking, you don't know my story, but when I hear yours, how is that possible the day after?
Mm.
Yeah, and it was very interesting and it was the morning after we flew down to Phoenix, Arizona at 5:30 in the morning. He got killed the night before, and news media was there, the police were there. We were standing on the corner where he got killed, doing interviews with the police because they were looking for who had killed him and trying to get leads. And so within that process, and it was a very interesting dynamic after we did some of the interviews and said, yes, we forgive whoever did this. We know there's obviously something going on in this person's life that wasn't right, that made them flee the scene. So, whatever that is, make it right, come forward, do the right thing. But we knew for ourselves the very night that it happened, when we were still in Colorado, that root of unforgiveness will ravage you. It'll ruin. Mm-hmm. And so making that conscious choice that night in our bathroom in Colorado of, no matter what happens, no matter if this person never comes forward, if we never catch him, if we never think, we have to forgive. And we actually took a lot of people close to us, family, friends, and things, were like, you're not just blankly forgiving this. Why are you doing that? Like, you don't know what this person, right, they might, like, mm-hmm, how can you even do that? Why would you do that the night before? And so, having to even explain that and work through that process with people, the closest people to us, of why would you do that? This person just did something horrible. You don't know if they deserve your forgiveness. They're not asking for it. That's for sure.
And I just want to ask a quick question. Well, first of all, thank you for coming on the show again, because I know you haven't done a lot of these types of interviews or podcasts or speaking in regard to Taylor. So thank you. Kelly and I feel very honored that you're here on Time for Forgiveness. But going back to the fact that you said you just knew that you had to forgive. What caused you to know? Was it just simply your faith, or how you had lived your life up to that point? You were just someone who saw forgiveness maybe in your childhood or in your formative years. I know Kelly and I talk about that isn't something that we saw on a regular basis, so it was something that I had to kind of transform that paradigm, if you will, over time. But can you go into that? Because I think that's we knew we had to do it, but how did you know? What caused you to know? And then what allowed you the strength to actually, as Kelly said, not just talk about it, but you actually did it?
Mm-hmm. Well, backing up to that night when Taylor was killed, we got the knock on the door. Our friends, so gracious, Taylor's best friend's parents, Drew, who was with him that night, his parents, John and Kelly, came to our door. And there's all the shock, there's everything, there's surrounding, there's the swirl, there's this is a night, this can't be happening. And it was at some point in that chaos of telling the kids, FaceTiming Taylor's younger brother, who was also at school with him, at college with him, FaceTiming with his fiance. And the swirl of that is when we found ourselves back in our bathroom, somehow clinging to each other. And what led to that moment of us making that decision that night together, holding on to each other, saying, we choose. We don't know who hit and killed our son. We don't know who chose or why they chose to drive off and flee the scene. But we are making the choice because of us, our story, our family.
Mhm.
And when you look at the choice, it is a choice to forgive. And then Kelly, you and I have talked about this. It is a choice to remain in forgiveness that comes up again and again and again. And looking back at both of our stories, whether it's hurt that we carry from church hurt, from friendships, from betrayals, military, along the journey, what we have seen in our own life when we choose to not carry the bitterness and the resentment that comes from unforgiveness, how it eats at you. And so because of those preceding things, and I don't want to say smaller and bigger, because in the when we're talking forgiveness, unforgiveness is unforgiveness. It doesn't matter the weight of the offense if we choose to carry unforgiveness towards it. But when we're talking here, a man has killed our son and fled the scene. That seems like a bigger scenario. So while we don't want to give weight to,
Right.
because
It's not like somebody just said an offhanded remark to
Right.
you,
It's
right?
not
This
like
is,
someone
yes.
said
I
it.
mean, this is the moment that your life changed in an instant.
Yes.
That's
But it's
what-
very,
and-
it's very
like-
powerful
or-
though, what you just said, because I think people do put a weight and they're like, well, I could forgive this, but I can't forgive that. And there was a word that we're going to go back to that you had mentioned earlier, is that deserving. Like when we put weight to it, then it's very easy to box in what someone deserves and what they don't deserve. So I think it's very powerful what you just said.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
But
You ask about the root of, where did we learn to forgive? And yes, I absolutely rooted in our faith, rooted in our upbringings of, seeing that lived out in our parents' life, seeing that lived out in the forgiveness we received. We're not perfect. We've done things, we messed up. We were pregnant with Taylor before we were married. And so asking that forgiveness of our parents, asking that of the Lord to forgive that, of knowing that was, not the ultimate plan of how it's supposed to happen, but choosing at that time too, when we went through that, of choosing, we've got to ask for that forgiveness, and we've got to receive that forgiveness from the Lord in order to, because if you don't receive it, you'll stay in it as well. So
Yeah.
That's really, I love that you talked about you have to receive it, because sometimes I think the hardest person to forgive is ourselves, and we don't feel worthy of it.
Yes.
So not only asking for it, but willingly receiving it. I would like to go in a direction of, and when we're talking about grief and loss, because this is kind of our part of our story as well, is there's a significant percent of couples, I feel, that go in different directions. We did in the beginning. He went in a different direction than I did of processing that loss and grief. So I just find it such a beautiful thing that you said you guys came together, you were clinging to one another, and you made this decision together.
Yeah.
And we both absolutely processed our grief completely differently.
Completely different.
I'm a retired Air Force. I substitute teach when I want to. And then at that time I was coaching football, wrestling, and our daughter's girls lacrosse team. And we were in the middle of the high school girls lacrosse season. And when it happened, and Taylor was killed on a Sunday night, we flew down Monday morning, and I coached my game on Wednesday and subbed on Thursday and Friday that week. And for me, I needed to get back into it.
For him.
Yeah.
right. That was your way of keeping your mind off it and
Yep.
processing. Right.
And for me, it was, Taylor wouldn't want me to give up on the girls for the season and do that. And he was such a big athlete and loved that stuff and a huge part of the school where I do most of my subbing at the high school. And just, I don't know if there was also a connection there of, okay, this is where Taylor spent a lot of time too. And so it was easier in that and around all the, the coaches that I coach with that coach Taylor and things like that. But then, Angela's
I wasn't
journey
really
was completely 180-degree different. She didn't work for.
I really did not work my business for about a year and a half. It was so hard to even function. And that's where, when we talk about clinging to each other and making that decision to forgive, and then that ongoing decision, because it's forgiving the man who killed our son, but there is countless, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, anyone listening can relate to this, there's countless collateral forgiveness along the way with people who say something, don't say something, the apathy from the justice, what we were yearning for justice, but the apathy from the court system, and dealing with that collateral forgiveness along the way. And where Nate needed to jump right back into things, I was not able to. And in making the decision to forgive and then walk through this together, while allowing space for us to process and grieve in the way we each needed to. It's in a marriage. We're married for a reason, because we're not the same.
Right.
That's a whole other topic.
Well, you can say that again.
Yes, we
Kelly
come
will attest to that.
together because
Yeah.
we're opposites in so many ways, which is why we make a beautiful whole before the Lord. It's why we come together. That also means that we're going to grieve differently. We're going to process differently and need different things. And so in clinging to each other, there's that physical, we were clinging to each other that night, making that decision to forgive. And the following night, when we did a live video, it was a Facebook Live from Phoenix, calling for someone to give us information, calling for this individual to turn themselves in, clinging to each other in that video, just proclaiming that forgiveness, saying, we forgive you.
Wow.
And in the midst of that physical clinging, allowing space for us to operate the way God has uniquely wired us to operate, and not being disdainful of that.
And so how long did it take for this gentleman to come forward?
He actually never came forward, but he was arrested 3 years to the day after it happened.
I didn't
So,
realize
and
that.
it was,
Taylor was killed April 8th, 2018, and we fought for arrests to be made. We knew who had done it.
I knew who did it within days.
We
I
knew.
knew how it happened.
Yeah.
I randomly met, talk about a divine intervention, met a guy in a window tint shop getting Taylor's car, the windows tinted, that I had never done in Phoenix. A guy that was on the scene when it happened. The guy that owned the shop.
Well, then, Nate, why did it take so long for charges to be brought forward 3 years later? If you had this information, you're obviously passing this on to the authorities, right?
Yes. So they hit Taylor, they went back to their apartment, and then they went and burned the vehicle. So they torched the vehicle within 2 hours of it happening.
Cover-up scheme.
Yeah, they burned it literally in the parking lot of a fire station. So, and like the fire department was pulling in, the person's doing donuts in the car, and then the next thing you know, it's on fire. So they knew exactly when it was set on fire. Then the couple reported the vehicle as being stolen. So 10 minutes after they set it on fire, it was reported as stolen. And that's the exact amount of time it takes from where they burned the vehicle out to get back to their apartment complex. So we had gone over, so elaborate cover up, but the bottom line is, the hard thing is, and you're talking about forgiveness, one of the lead detective on the case has come very, is close to our family, and, has done a lot with that. But there was I mean, the Phoenix Police Department is a big department, and this was on the edge of the Phoenix and Glendale Police Department. So the Phoenix Police Department was the one that responded to the scene. The Phoenix Police Department responded to burning out the vehicle, but the couple that killed Taylor's apartment was in Glendale. So then a Glendale police officer went to the apartment and interviewed them. And so there was a lot of
Breakdown.
Mismanagement. Yeah.
Yeah, but this vehicle matches the description. It was 2 miles away. It got burned out. So a lot of details that weren't necessarily put together that night.
There's a lot of breakdown in the justice
How did it eventually come that charges were brought forward? Was there some key piece of evidence that finally came forward or brought to light? Or
I honestly, our intercession, the power of prayer works, and intercession, there was evidence all along the way, and there were some pieces that finally came together in a manner that they knew we were not going to go away, because forgiveness does not negate justice. I want to be clear on that. Forgiveness does not negate justice. We have a God who is love. He is love. And within that love is justice and mercy and grace and forgiveness and all of those things. And so there were a few pieces that came together. Someone else who was in prison who said, hey, wait, I know who killed that GCU student back in 2018. They were finally able to interview this person and use that in order to bring enough together, knowing we were not going anywhere, and make the arrests.
Yeah, you wanted justice. Absolutely.
Yeah,
but you had said the word, there was a breakdown.
Yes.
And although there's a breakdown, you're still asking of yourself and being asked to remain in forgiveness. And we're talking not 3 weeks, 3 years. And I believe, go ahead, please.
And then there was another year's worth of lead up to the trial.
Yeah. So we're talking about ongoing justice, but Kelly can continue.
Well, remaining in forgiveness, but I want to make sure that I have the correct understanding that to this day, the driver does not feel the necessity to ask for forgiveness. He feels that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So they just, we thought when the trial was done that everything was like done and over. So, I mean, that was almost 4 years to the day, once again, that the trial, and it wasn't a trial, it was a sentencing hearing, because they offered him a plea agreement down to one charge that was pretty pathetic when it came down to it.
We'll just say the whole process. If anyone wants to know details, we're very open with that. But the whole process was a breakdown.
And so we thought when that sentencing hearing ended that, like, okay, we're done. But then the judge left it open to, okay, do you want restitution from this individual? Which we'd been told you can't even ask for it. So then it kept it open for another year. And by that time, the judge retired, the prosecutor, like all these things, like, and so it got kicked even past that year, another 3 more months. We got new prosecutors in, we got new judges in.
It's like you had to start all over again, probably.
Yeah.
That's probably what it felt like to you guys.
And the hard thing is even at the sentencing hearing, when the judge passed down her sentence, like the Adrian that killed Taylor, technically admitted to doing it finally in his plea agreement, that he was the one responsible for it, but never admitted to burning the vehicle out. They didn't bring any of those charges, never admitted to anything other than fleeing the scene of a fleeing the scene of a fatal accident that he caused. That was the only charge that he ever went down for. And so, even when the judge did the sentencing, her comment was, I'm not sure why this is the only charge that was brought against him. It seems like there could have and should have been so much more with the evidence that you have. So, that's just another dagger when you're sitting there in the courtroom, like, okay, she's about to hand down a sentence that isn't even what he should get based on what the judge is looking at the evidence going, why didn't more happen with that? And within that, Adrian got to make a statement. We got to speak at the sentencing hearing, and Adrian didn't, I don't remember him.
The lack of sincerity is what it sounds like, right? No remorse, no heartfelt, boy,
So
I
even
took your
though
son away from you, and I mean,
Yeah.
he was sorry that he was caught.
Yeah.
He was
oh,
sorry.
sure he was. I
brought it
mean,
Yeah.
right, yeah,
But
But he
there
was
was
absolutely
no-
shocked when he was actually sentenced to prison. He thought
Wow.
there was, I don't know how he thought he was gonna, he was a prior felon as well. He had another felony for stolen goods earlier. So I don't know if his lawyer didn't talk to him like, listen, you are going to jail for this.
But even the most recent statement that he made to the court system was, and Kelly, you said that correctly. He said, well, I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
right.
And just to say that.
Takes no responsibility for his actions.
No, he
Correct.
actually,
Correct.
he made that statement as a part of, he applied for clemency in the case. So in the state of Arizona, after you've served, if you're sentenced to more than 3 years in prison, after you've served 2 years of it, you can ask the governor for clemency to get rid of the rest of your sentence. And he actually applied for it. And so like I said, when we thought everything was over, and then we got a letter from Maricopa County again saying, hey, he's applied for clemency. We're like,
how do you feel about that right now? I don't know, what was the sentence, and what, if he's released, what amount of the sentence would he be actually serving?
Well, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison, and in Arizona, you will only serve 85% of your prison sentence. That's just standard off the top, and I guess that's true in most states. We actually just voted, and there was something on our ballot here in Colorado in regards to that type of thing. So the one caveat with him was, because he was a prior felon, he's not eligible for parole during that 6 years.
Okay.
So we, like I said, when he was sentenced, we were like, okay, it's done, it's over. He can't appeal it because he accepted a plea bargain. He can't get paroled, so he's in prison for the next, he had already served 30 or 45 days in jail leading up to the trial and things. And so, he was going to serve not even, a little over 5 years more in prison. And so, in applying for clemency, it was like, what is this guy thinking? And, thankfully, in going through the process, the board, he had to write a letter to the board, and that's where he stated, basically, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time in this. And thankfully, that clemency board turned him and basically said, you're lucky this is all you got.
Right.
And it goes back to, once again, they said, it looks like you should have been and could have been charged with a whole lot more. The fact that you only got what you did, you better go back to your jail cell and be happy that this is all you're spending.
So let me ask, a breakdown in the system, the justice system, it doesn't seem that it's really fair. And then there's really no remorse from the individual that killed your son. How do you let go of all of that?
I don't.
And even worse to it, honestly, his wife was in the front seat of the car where Taylor hit and she was the one that, it happened right in front of her. Their children were in the car with them, young children.
Oh my God.
And immediately after him being sentenced, his wife stood up in the gallery, and the judge had said, please, everybody remain silent after I read this sentence. You'll just quietly leave the court. She stood up and yelled, we're going to fight this, baby. And we're like, seriously?
Wow.
Like, you?
Yeah.
And it's laughable. Like, even when I hear him recount these things, it truly is laughable. And how do you let go? One of the things that we have come back to time and again is with this incident with the husband and wife that were responsible for killing Taylor, fleeing the scene, elaborate cover up, hiding for 3 years, having to be brought in, and then this long battle
Drawn
with
out.
the justice system, so full of apathy. And that phrase, forgive and forget, guys, who in the world came up with that?
Yeah.
Who in the world?
100%.
But what we can do is what you said, where we release into the hands of God. And one of the things that I've come back to that we talk talk about frequently is, who's the one who taught us to pray? Well, Jesus taught us to pray. And in the Lord's Prayer, the only thing in the Lord's Prayer, go read it. Any listeners, go read it for yourself. Don't take our word for it. Please go read in the book of Matthew, the Lord's Prayer, where he's teaching us to pray. What's the only part that is ours? Help me forgive.
Mhm.
Help me forgive others as you have forgiven me. And the releasing, the opening our hands, it's there. We have it. The apathy, the injustice, the oh my gosh, what was said in the courtroom, not taking responsibility, all of these things, all of that collateral forgiveness, even along the way, all of that is here. God, what do we do with that? Okay, today, help me to forgive as you've forgiven us. Okay, tomorrow, Jesus, help me forgive. And he gives us our daily bread. And we have not walked this out perfectly. Forgiveness does not mean we're not going to experience the pain.
Sure.
Any person that you've brought on here, I'm sure they're in that. It doesn't mean we forget. It doesn't mean that we don't experience the excruciating pain. In fact, we have to walk through. We have to walk through those emotions in order to be able to release those to a loving God who loves Adrian and Tina Favela as much as he loves us. They are children of God every bit as much as we are. There were years where I brought their family before the Lord in prayer, their children. God, would you heal the hearts of these children who witnessed this? Lord, I'm releasing these hearts that seem so hard to you. Years of that. It was an amazing thing when I left, when we were leaving the courtroom from the sentencing hearing, and the Holy Spirit just said, you're released. You don't need to pray for their family. You don't need to pray for anyone to come forward anymore.
Right.
You've prayed for this along the way. And there was a moment in the sentencing hearing, only God can arrange these things, where I was able to have an encounter with their daughter. She would have been in the car that night. She would have been in the car.
And
when
how
they
old
hit
was she at this time then? At the
So
trial?
this would have
The
been
daughter.
4 years later. So she probably would have been in a car seat around 1 or 2. And so she was 5 or 6 when I encountered her during the sentencing hearing.
Mhm.
And she was saying her ABCs and she was counting. And I was able to walk up to her and say, good job. You're doing so great. And she said, yeah, mommy told us we get to go to McDonald's in the park afterwards if we're really good. And I said, that's just the best. I'm so proud of you for sitting out here. And I was able to have a conversation with this little girl that I had interceded for. So when we're able to walk in this place, recommitting, remaining in forgiveness, and all of those webs, those threads that reach out with all the collateral stuff that happens, man, these incredible divine encounters that God can bring along the way, because our hearts are, I almost don't want to say soft, softer and surrendered, and we're looking for them.
Yeah, because there was another time when we came out of the courtroom there, and like you said, it was 4 years leading up to that time. It was 3 years of waiting for an arrest to happen, and during that 3 years, we were actually contacted by different family members. His family knew, their family knew he had done this. Their whole family knew, and their whole family was keeping it a secret. We had been contacted by an ex-spouse.
I don't know how you live with that. That's just.
I don't know either, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know how you get up every day and look at yourself in the mirror and feel like you're not just a sack of you know what. I don't know. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm sorry, Nate.
Yeah. So we, had that contact and had actually, the police had tried to do interviews with this person. It was a big mess. They could never get a hold of it, never get it. And we recorded conversations that the police got.
It's a big mess.
But after all of that, when we walked out of the sentencing hearing, I believe it was Adrian's grandmother was the only
Or
person.
aunt. It was his
It was
aunt.
an aunt that came up just in tears and said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what has happened to your family." And that's the only
one.
the
His
only
only
one.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was just broken, and you know, I know what he did and it was wrong. I'm so sorry for what happened. So, but yeah.
Well, you guys are just a true inspiration, and like how brave you are. I mean, to go through this and you're still together, and I'm just so inspired by your story. We have a lot of amazing people come on, and you guys are at the top of the list. I tell you what you've gone through and what you stand for, and your faith, because you know
Mm,
that's where we need to go here. Probably
yeah.
you can't get through these situations, these things that just where you can never prepare for something like this, and it just happens in an instant, and everything's changed. And without your faith, where are you? I know Kelly and I, when we talk about our story, um, that's how we got through. Without that, I don't know where we would have ended up.
But I started out different. I mean, I was really questioning my faith. I felt abandoned, and there was some anger there in the beginning. But it was kind of like that word that you're saying, that he's just softening your heart. And I remember at a time it was like a question, are you tired of being angry? And when you said the word open, it was this like suggestion that, you know, if you'll open yourself and make room for my work, I'll use this for good.
Yeah.
And he did in a way that I could never had fathomed that he would. But I'm curious, I know that you have been opened and you have made room for that work. What does that look like in your life?
It is an ongoing journey. When people, if anyone is listening to us now and they're going, oh, this seems so perfect. Don't we look at others and say, wow, they look like they walked this out in such a healthy way. And look at them, listen to them. And they're great and they're
Well,
together.
how, like, you know, when he's asking us to be open and to make room for his work, that he'll use it for good. What have you seen in your life? How has he used this for good? What does that look like for you?
And for us, and I think you're in the same place with this, where you came to this. It doesn't mean that we're not angry. It doesn't mean that we're not sad. We're not grieving. Man, I tend to lift really well in my CrossFit days when I'm angry. I do awesome lifts. I PR when I'm angry. And when I'm sad, I'm trudging through mud. And because we can't change it, and in our bathroom that night, and when we went live with that Facebook video calling for whoever had information to come forward, we looked at each other multiple times and said, we can't change this. So God, you better. And it's okay. I just want to say it's okay to talk to God this way. We can be real with him. In fact, if we can't be real with God, who can we be real with? And saying to God, we would change this in an instant. This might sound harsh. I don't care how many people get saved. I don't care who has a life turnaround. If we could wave a magic wand and snap our fingers, we would have Taylor back here in an instant. They can have a life change some other way. But saying to God, we can't change this. So you better darn well use it for your good. You're going to show us your goodness. We will see goodness and mercy in the land of the living. We will see it. And walking that out when we have still almost not a week goes by that we don't get a message from someone saying, I've recommitted my life to Christ. I'm adventuring more. There's a hashtag, 2 hashtags that we've just had from the beginning. Hashtag because of Taylor and hashtag live like T White. And we'll get people doing some post about climbing a mountain, getting outdoors more and doing that hashtag. Leaning more into their relationship with God and that hashtag, moving away from heavy drinking and that hashtag. And so we see those things and that goodness that comes. And Kelly, we know that you have seen that, and that, thank you, honey. That is something I've clung to, because people say, well, but God caused it. Don't we hear that? Well, God caused it, and I will press back. I will go toe to toe, lovingly, in
No, God did
truth.
not cause that.
Anyway,
Absolutely
he did
not.
not. Romans
Yeah.
8 says, God will cause it to work together for good. God does not cause all things, but he will cause all things to work together for good. And wrestling through, he did allow it. He did allow it.
Guys, I'm just so blessed, and I feel so impacted by your story. I really do. It was such a heartfelt story of compassion. But this, I think bravery is the word that comes to me. Just your willingness to put yourself out like that you have, and how you've dealt with this and how you've moved through this. So we just appreciate your heart and your transparency for all of our listeners out here on Time for Forgiveness. For Kelly and Bob Pascuzzi, we'll see you on the next episode of Time for Forgiveness. Thank you.